Let's start with a truth that most people overlook. Wars are not really about tanks, guns, or brute force. They're about leverage, timing, and power perception. The battlefield is just one of many arenas where humans compete. Others are quieter: boardrooms, negotiations, politics, even personal life. And once you understand war, everything else starts making sense. Every war starts before the first shot. Long before anyone fires, there is already a fight happening. The real battlefield begins in the mind. Think about how powerful it is when, like, one side believes it can't win. You don't need to fight someone who has already surrendered mentally. The best fighters do not just build armies, they build psychological gravity. In modern terms, it means in negotiations, the side that sets the emotional tone usually wins. In competition, reputation can destroy resistance before action begins. In politics, perception is often more powerful than facts. The smartest strategists know if you control the mental terrain, the physical battle might not even be necessary. Terrain isn't dirt, it's context. On a literal battlefield, terrain decides everything. High ground, choke points, escape routes. But in everyday life, so-called terrain is whatever shapes the environment of a conflict, like legal frameworks, timing, power dynamics, information flow. People lose not because they're weak, but because they misread the ground they're standing on. When you walk into a deal, a pitch, a negotiation, or even conflict with a partner, you should be asking, who controls the space here? What is invisible but shaping everything? What assumptions are already built into this room? Smart strategists do not just react to terrain, they engineer it. Deception is a strategic tool. Most amateurs think deception equals lying. It does not. Deception is creating perception, making the other side see what you want them to see. In war, this is classic misdirection, showing your left hand while striking with your right. In modern life, it's shaping narratives, timing releases, revealing partial truths, setting false expectations. This is uncomfortable for idealists but powerful. But power is not polite. Control what they think they know, and you control their moves before they make them. The center of gravity, the real target. The most decisive commanders do not try to fight everything at once. They hunt for what military theory calls the center of gravity, the one node that, if broken, causes the rest to collapse. That can be a supply route, a key leader, a critical belief, or one fragile assumption. Most people waste energy fighting symptoms. Winners go for the keystone. In negotiation, that might be one critical objection holding everything back. In competition, it might be one partnership that tilts the whole market. You don't need 100 punches, you need one precise hit. Tempo is power. Wars are won not only by force, but by who sets the tempo. Tempo is not just speed, it is a rhythm. It is who makes the other side react instead of act. When your opponent moves to your rhythm, they are already playing your game. In a deal, controlling tempo might mean silence when they expect an answer. In competition, it might mean launching a product before anyone else is ready. In arguments, it can mean slowing the pace so the other person loses emotional momentum. Tempo is an invisible lever. Once you learn to hold it, you stop fighting on their timeline and make them dance to yours. Logistics win more wars than heroes. Heroic stories make good movies, but logistics win real wars. Armies collapse without supply lines. Projects collapse without infrastructure. Deals collapse without follow through. The strongest strategy is worthless if it cannot be sustained. People overestimate vision and underestimate systems. Power is built on boring, invisible, reliable structure. That's why the side with stable logistics even if it looks less glamorous, usually wins. Never enter a fair fight. Here's another uncomfortable truth. No great power fights fair. Not once. They shape the terrain, control the tempo, stack alliances, flood the field with leverage. If the fight feels fair, it is because you're already losing. This applies everywhere, from startups to geopolitics. Power tilts the board before the game even begins. Discipline outlasts bravery. Bravery is loud, discipline is quiet, and discipline wins. Armies that break under pressure do not lose because they're weaker, they lose because panic spreads faster than courage. The disciplined unit doesn't need to shout, it holds the line. Translate that. Teams with discipline outlast flashy competitors. Leaders with emotional control outmaneuver those who rely on charisma alone. Quiet consistency beats temporary brilliance. The last line actually really genius. Let me repeat. Quiet consistency beats temporary brilliance. Control the story, control the war. Wars are narratives in motion. Whoever controls the story controls moral, public support, and even the definition of victory. Even the most decisive military victories have always been accompanied by strategic storytelling. In our world, this is branding, political framing, social media perception, reputation. If people believe you're winning, half the fight is already over. In other words, psychological factor is already half win. Retreat is a move, not a loss. In strategy, retreat is not a failure, it's repositioning. Great tacticians withdraw to create better positions, not because they're weak, but because they're patient. In real life, it means pulling back from a bad deal is power, not defeat. Stepping away from a toxic game can be strategic repositioning. Or delaying an initiative can increase leverage later. Ego hates retreat. Strategy uses it like a blade. It's like, practically speaking, it is like I like another quote. Short short-term sacrifice for the long-term game. Patience is active, not passive. The loudest person in the room often isn't the most powerful. True power often waits silently, deliberately. Patience is not doing nothing, it's building pressure without moving. That's how weaker forces collapse, not in one big strike, but under the weight of slow, constant pressure they didn't even see building. Patience is a weapon most people never master because it looks too boring, but it's devastatingly effective. Fear is engineered, not accidental. Fear isn't just a reaction, it is often manufactured on purpose. Throughout history, strong forces didn't need to fight everyone. They made a few brutal examples and let fear travel for them. One victory, one burned village, and the next 10 enemies surrendered without a fight. In our world, it means markets react to fear faster than logic. Negotiators use silence, posture, or information control to create pressure. Leaders who understand fear do not avoid it, they steer it. Intelligence wins before the battle begins. A real power doesn't wait for the fight, it wins it before it starts. Accurate intelligence turns unknowns into calculated probabilities. That's why the best operators invest more in knowing than in fighting. Know the market before launching, know the decision market before negotiating, know the opponent before they even realize they are in a game. The battle is already 80% over once the information gap is in your favor. Alliances build power that solo strength cannot. Lone wolf stories sound romantic, but empires are built on alliances, not isolation. Smart strategies do not just gather allies, they build mutual interest structures that make betrayal too costly. Power isn't only about what you can do, it's about who will move with you when it matters. Attrition is as lethal as ambush. Not every victory is lightning fast. Some are slow and burns. Attrition breaks opponents without a single grand battle. It's exhausting, demoralizing, inevitable. In modern competition, it means sometimes you don't need to crush your opponent, you just need to outlast them. Stability can outwin explosiveness. Consistent low pressure beats chaotic aggression. The long game does not make headlines, but it buries rivals quietly. Silence is power amplified. Silence isn't the absence of strategy, silence is strategy. When people talk too much, they reveal themselves. When you hold silence, they feel it, often with the intel you need. In high stakes spaces, the most powerful person is rarely the loudest. It is the one who can hold silence without flinching. Strategy is probability, not prophecy. Plans do not survive first contact, they never have. But good strategy is not about predicting the future, it's about preparing for multiple futures. In other words, like a plan A, B, C, etc. think like this. Do not try to guess what will happen. Map out what could happen, what is most likely, and what you will do in each case. So in other words, it is not about being prepared for multiple million scenarios. It is about focusing to the main scenarios which got highest probability. It's all about probabilities, because we can't create perfect plan, because you can't predict anything, but you can predict something. And the point is, yes, it could be some failure, but that failure, because it got lowest probability, got very low impact to your overall map plan. That's why flexible thinkers dominate rigid ones. Power does not require certainty, it requires optionality. Leadership is energy, not titles. On the battlefield, soldiers do not follow rank, they follow presence. People can feel certainty, confidence, and control before you speak a word. That's why leadership energy, not titles, not authority, holds lines together under fire. This is not something you fake, it is something you radiate when you're clear about what you're doing and why. Every victory has a cost. Victory isn't free. Every conquest in war, business, politics carries a maintenance bill. Empires collapse not during conquest, but during administration. The bigger the win, the heavier the weight of holding it. Strategists calculate not only how to win, but how to sustain what's won. War is just another language for power. Strip away the uniforms and the weapons. What remains is human competition. Structure, violent, but strategic. War is power in its rawest form, but in the principles behind it work everywhere. For instance, shape the terrain, control tempo, win before the battle, tell their story, choose when to strike, know what to sustain. These are not just battlefield lessons, they're survival tools for high-stakes world, like business, politics, influence, negotiation, and personal power. And understanding war does not make you violent, it makes you strategic. And finally, I can say that power does not show up with a flag, it shows up quietly, early, and well prepared. The winners are rarely the loudest, they're the ones who understand the game beneath the game and play it along before everyone else realizes it's started. Thank you for listening, and if you like this podcast, let me know in comments. Smash the like button, subscribe button. See you next time.